the chosen. Be brave, Professor. Be brave like my mother.
How do you feel?
Excellent. Really excellent.
Hey everyone, welcome to Hogwarts, a podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Hogwarts, a podcast. We are covering Chapter 18, Birthday Surprises. Elizabeth is with us.
Surprise.
Not really a surprise.
Not really a surprise.
I had you scheduled for this. You were on the books already for it. But someone in this chapter does get a birthday surprise. Spoiler alert, it's Ron.
Yay.
So, before we get into the chapter, we have a couple of things to discuss. We have a bunch of shout-outs. We actually recorded a couple of episodes earlier, so we actually haven't recorded in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's been a while.
It's been a minute. And
we've been busy, though, that's why.
We've been busy. We've been traveling a little bit. We'll talk about that after we get through some of the shout-outs here, but we'll start out with a shout-out from Chamber of Secrets, Chapter 4. That's the Flourish and Blots chapter from that book. Chris says, I love this episode. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Really appreciate the positivity on the comment. We always love positivity on comments.
To be fair, I don't remember what that chapter was about. I'd have to go back to listen to it.
That was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago.
We have another comment. This is from, you talk about a long time ago. Sorcerer's Stone, Chapter 1, The Boy Who Lived.
Okay.
Really
All the way
long,
back in the beginning.
Really long time ago. It's a very cool comment, though, from Dickie. And Dickie says, accidentally said I never read the series. That's referring to the poll. Have you read the series before?
Okay.
That's on the Chapter 1 poll. Please do our polls. He says, accidentally said I never read the series, but I absolutely did. I'm dyslexic, and this is the series that made me absolutely love to read and write with that disability.
That makes me so happy, because I always encourage people to read.
Yeah, it says, can't wait to listen to the rest of the episodes. So,
well, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dickie. And yeah, I think that's a common thread that you get through a lot of Harry Potter fans, especially those of our age, where we kind of got back into reading.
Or it was like the book that hooked people into reading.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this series does have a lot of important impact, at least to our generation, and I think to younger generations as well with that. So it's a really cool aspect of this series that I think a lot of people have that connecting vibe with. So thanks to Dickie for that cool, very cool comment. We got another comment from Half-Blood Prince. Okay, we're getting more recent, more recent comments.
Which chapter is this?
Chapter 16, A Very Frosty Christmas, which was an interesting conversation between
you and
Julie.
Julie. Yeah.
So the comment is from A.S. Young 08. And they say that, no, I'm with Julie on this one.
You should see his face right now.
No, I'm with Julie on this one with regards to how she sees the ministry. They're not giving Harry an opportunity to have a voice. He's just a mascot to them.
Agreed.
Julie will be thrilled when she hears of this comment. That's fine. I totally understand that, and I'm not entirely disagreeing with that either. I just think Harry misses a chance. I think he misses a potential opportunity to at least get his voice in the mix.
I do think the ministry would be fools to not listen to him, but I know that they would be fools, so it wouldn't work.
I mean, if we're looking at the real world, they'd also be fools to really let a 16-year-old dictate how a government works.
Yeah.
No matter who that 16-year-old is, that's a little foolish and naive, but... So, I mean, I can't blame Scrimgeour for that anyway. Or Rufus. We're calling him Rufus.
Rufus!
But yeah, anyway. I don't entirely disagree with the idea that he'd just be a mascot. Sure.
Well, Julie will be very happy.
Julie will be very happy that you agree with it.
So thank you for that comment.
We have one other comment to discuss, and it's from Half-Blood Prince, Chapter 13, The Secret Riddle. And this is from AV, who's been very prevalent in our comments section, so we thank you, AV, for that. And AV says, when Dumby showed Mrs. Cole a blank paper, she had a confused look on her face. He definitely confused her. That seems to be a very commonly used spell on Muggles anytime it's necessary.
Agreed.
However, does that make it right?
If you're going to protect the wizarding world, I guess so. You're
just often in putting your own...
It reminds me of Men in Black with the little, like, pen thing
The
that they
neuralizer?
do.
Yeah,
they
yeah.
just, like, erase their memories.
Yeah, a little
It's
bit.
100% that.
I don't know. I feel it's a little dodgy, but the way we're reading this series, and because it's Albus Dumbledore, we're like, oh, it's fine. That's fine. Where I feel like if it was Voldy doing this, we'd be like, that's awful. Oh, he's taken away their... it's just a point of view thing, which is what I quibble with, but whatever. Thank you, AV, for the comment. We really appreciate the interactions. Like I said, this is the first episode we're recording in quite a while. Because we've done some traveling here at the podcast.
You extensively.
Me extensively, and me abroad.
Yeah.
I have left the United States, and I have traveled to the Netherlands, Luxembourg, and Belgium. And Belgium is where I'd like to discuss, just briefly before we get into the chapter, because I was stunned at how many Harry Potter-related stores and shops were all throughout Belgium. There were many in Brussels, and there were a few in Bruges, which I'd like to shout out one specific one, the Wandering Wizard Emporium in Bruges. I stopped in. I'd like to just shout out Elin, who works there. She was great to talk to. We had a really long discussion about Harry Potter and about other things. Big fan of Pirates of the Caribbean, Elin. So that's awesome. But yeah, she was really cool to talk to, and they had some really cool items there that I don't think I've ever personally seen.
Yeah, I like that Remember All light that you sent me a picture of.
The
I thought
Remember
that looked
All
cool.
lamp was really cool.
Yeah.
It would obviously glow red.
Yeah.
And then they had Hagrid's pink umbrella for sale. They had the Sword of Godric Gryffindor for sale.
Very cool.
So, I mean, if you had almost €300 in your pocket, you can get the Sword of Godric Gryffindor. But no, they had some really cool items. So if you happen to be in Bruges, please stop by the Wandering Wizard Emporium and see Elin. She also works in the Historium right next door. So if you're into some Bruges history, you could also see her there as well. But it turns out Belgium is just a big bastion of Harry Potter fandom.
That's awesome.
And I looked into our statistics on our podcast, and it's the 4th leading country.
Oh, cool.
In listens for our podcast.
You could have been walking by listeners without even realizing it.
It's the first country that English is not their primary language. So obviously the United States is their leading one. Then we have Canada and the United Kingdom, all English-speaking primarily countries. Belgium, obviously not English as their first language, but 52% of our listens in Belgium comes from the Flanders region, and 44% comes from the Brussels capital region. So kind of a pretty even split between the two major regions of Belgium, but
Very cool.
It's really cool. So thank you to all of our listeners in Belgium. Thank you to Elin for your awesome help and company on that wonderful visit to the Wandering Wizard Emporium in Bruges. And then you've also done a little bit of traveling yourself.
Yeah, my family plus Jen took a trip down to Orlando, and we went to the Wizarding World at Universal Studios, which I've been to before, but it was still obviously super fun to see. We did a live stream, if you happen to see that, on our social media. I got to go on the Hagrid's motorbike ride, which I'd never been on before, which you recommended that I do.
Love that ride.
It was very fun. It was also really cool because we saw a model for the new park that they're going to be opening, which has a section dedicated to the Ministry of Magic. And the pictures that they had so far seem to indicate that it's set in Paris, which makes us think that maybe there's a tie-in with the Fantastic Beasts series, possibly.
That makes sense.
And we were trying to figure out how many rides they're going to be having because they had these really big... almost like warehouses buildings, which I know usually is where they store rides, and it either looked like one massive ride or like 2 rides, possibly both in the same like opening area. I don't know, so I'm very intrigued for what this is going to be in the future.
I would like it if they did the Paris Ministry of Magic, because it seems, if you've seen the movies, the Paris Ministry of Magic is much more ornate and much more fanciful. I feel like the Ministry of Magic in London is very plain.
And dark.
Yeah. It doesn't lend itself to getting lost in that fantasy world kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know? But Paris, I think they could pull it off fairly well.
I'm very excited for it. So we will definitely be back.
Now, I do have a question for you. When you did the Hagrid ride,
Yes.
were you the motorbike or the sidecar?
I was in the sidecar.
When I did it, I was on the motorbike. So how was the experience in the sidecar?
It was fun. I did single rider because the line was 85 minutes long and it was about to rain. Thankfully, I was able to get on before they closed the ride down for the rain. But I was paired with a random person and they got on the bike first. I'm like, that's fine. It was cool in the motor car. I felt like Harry. I did, and I'm not a huge roller coaster person. If it goes upside down, I'm like, no, thank you. But this was really, really cute. And I liked hearing like Hagrid narrate as you went. And especially when you go up, but then you see the track stops and he's like, oh no, the bike it has powered off. And you zip like backwards. That part was really, really cool.
So, again, Jen and Elizabeth did a live stream from Diagon Alley, which you can find the recording of on our Instagram. So go check that out. And if you have any questions, I believe we're going to have Jen on here soon.
Yeah.
And so Jen and Elizabeth can get a little bit deeper into their visit to the Wizarding World.
It was fun.
For us, now, we're going to dive deeper into this actual chapter of Chapter 18, Birthday Surprises. So in this chapter, we essentially get a little update on Harry's homework that he was given by Albus.
I love the first thing that he did was went to Hermione and was like, what's a Horcrux? He's like,
Well,
I have no idea.
That's fair, and alarming that she hadn't actually heard of one.
Uh-huh.
And then we also get apparition lessons, and we also obviously get the birthday, which is Ron's birthday, and obviously some shenanigans happen. So, we start off this chapter, like you said, with Harry going to both Ron and Hermione and being like, hey, so this is the task that has been set upon me. How do you think I should go about it?
Their advice is interesting. I mean, Hermione, I think, has the better advice of this is clearly important and difficult to get. You need to approach this very carefully. Whereas Ron is like, oh, you're his favorite. Just ask him. I'm sure he'll hand it on a golden platter.
In fairness to Ron, he's not wrong. Horace Slughorn loves Harry.
Hermione's not wrong either. This is a very tricky memory that he's trying to hide from people.
But it's not like Ron's coming from nowhere. He's right. Slughorn does have an affinity for Harry. So in theory, it might be easier.
I feel like it's a balance of the two.
Albus brought Harry in to do this homework for a reason.
I still think he should approach it with a little more thought than what he does.
I agree with that. He should actually form some sort of plan, and we'll see how his plan goes in a bit. But we get the potions class, and we get Slughorn teaching about Golpalot's third law. Mm-hmm. And the law states that the antidote for a blended poison will be equal to more than the sum of the antidotes for each of the separate components.
Which Hermione rattles it out so quickly, and obviously the point is for you, the reader, to not really be able to follow either, because Ron and Harry are both like, what?
I'm not going to lie, I had to read it like 3 times.
I did as well, and my understanding, you can correct me if you got a different interpretation, but I think what it is whenever you're making an antidote for a poison that is created from multiple ingredients, you have to consider the antidote for each individual ingredient, and then you have to add up all of those ingredients, and the antidote for the whole entire poison has to be more than the individual ingredients.
Yes and no. The tricky part of this law is the equal to the more than the sum bit.
Which is worded poorly.
It's worded very poorly. So what that means, and the only reason I got this was because after I read it 3 times, I continued on to Slughorn's own explanation later. Because Harry blanks out for a little bit and misses half of Slughorn's spiel on the law, which I know we have a disagreement on going forward. But Harry blanks out for half of it. So we miss like half of Slughorn's spiel. But then he clicks back in, and he essentially tells you that so like you started out saying, each poison that's in the blended mix requires an antidote. So you need the antidote for each poison that's in this
each
mix.
Ingredient, yeah.
But then he goes on to say that you need to then figure out what additional component needs to be added.
Well, he said that there's like a reveal a spell that you need to do in order to determine what ingredients we'll put into the potion as a whole.
Scarpin's Revilla spell.
Yes.
Yes.
Which, again, Harry doesn't get it. Ron has completely tuned out because he's not used to not having Hermione's help with such things. But yeah, basically their assignment is go get like a random poison that I got bottled up over there, create the antidote. And I personally highly enjoy Hermione's glee at the fact that Harry doesn't understand this. Like, you can't just go into the prince's book and find some cheat code. Like, you need to understand the principles of this in order to actually succeed at the lesson.
He was quite disappointed that the prince seemed to, like Hermione, also understand the law without further explanation.
It reminds me of my students who, whenever they get a grammar packet, the ones who like to copy other people's packets, come test time, have no idea what they're doing. And that is 100% what Harry is getting here. It's karma for not trying to learn the subject, just using, like, the quick cheats for it.
I think it's a little bit of Google culture. You just get used to getting lazy and Googling an answer instead of actually, like, knowing the information. So they've clearly gotten a little lazy and can't think of, and this is a perfect example for the Harry haters, because they're like, this is why we don't consider Harry to be intelligent, is because he clearly in certain moments can't think for himself. It's like, maybe you should not look for the quick answer and actually use your brain and like piece together what you need to do. This is like a pinnacle example for those people.
I mean, they do their best to copy the others. Like, they see that Hermione like separated her ingredients by using the spell.
Well, they don't even know that.
Well, she did it non-verbally.
Correct.
They got, was it Dean or Ernie?
They heard Ernie use a spell and they're like, ooh, that sounds impressive.
Let's do that. So they did that much. But I feel like a lot of this lesson, which seemed to fly by, was them just being like, what do you think we should do next? Let's just wait for somebody else to do it and copy them.
So you have an issue with how Slughorn ran this class.
I do. I feel like Slughorn completely... I mean, you're right that, yes, Harry tuned out, but I still feel like Slughorn rushed past the principle of the third law. I feel like a better way to teach this, because I like the lesson in general. I think the idea of creating an antidote for a random poison is perfect. But I think where he is flawed is he should have demonstrated for them how to do it first, so that they actually have a model of, this is how you separate the ingredients. This is what I mean by saying that you need equal to more than the sum of, and this is how you create the antidote. Like, he just basically was like, here's the law, here's what I want you to do, and do it.
See, I disagree, and here's why. I was confused by Hermione's retelling of the law. And what clarified the law was Slughorn explaining it, not a paragraph later.
I still feel like he didn't explain it very well.
We miss half of the explanation. Why?
I know.
Because Harry tuned out. So Slughorn does go into an explanation of like, yes, Hermione, you're right. 10 points to Gryffindor.
Well, no. He said, if we take his law to be true, then blah, 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 blah. And that's where he tunes out. So I feel like he didn't really properly explain what this law is meaning, because all he said was, well, it's true. Let's move on.
I know, I think he did. We just didn't get it. Because our main character who we're
it.
viewing this world through.
The way he worded it seemed to me like he was just like, yes, you understand that? Cool, then everyone must understand it. Let's move on to the next step of how to do this assignment.
He also gave the Scarpin's Revella spell, which is how you're supposed to go about separating the potion ingredients.
Yes.
He gave you the literal tools to use.
But I still feel like he should have demonstrated. It'd be like if you take a mechanics class and it's like, okay, here's this car and you need to change the oil and here's how you verbally do it, but now do it. Like, there are people who, yes, are verbal learners, but there's a lot of people who need the visual as well. And to see it demonstrated first, I feel like is the better way to teach the lesson.
I think we've obviously entered into an advanced potions class. And there are some kids in this class that have clearly tuned out at a more complicated concept that they can't wrap their heads around.
Yeah.
And they thus tune out the actual instruction that the professor is giving, which, again, me reading the law, ooh, I'm confused. I kind of tune out. What does this mean? And then he gives, in the half paragraph that we get from Slughorn, I then be like, oh, that's what he means. I got it now.
I still think he didn't do it as well as he could have, and
I think that's Harry's fault.
I'm also going to use, though, as evidence of that, the fact that the vast majority of the class had no idea what they were doing. Like, by the end of it,
They all seem to have tuned out.
When he was going cauldron to cauldron to cauldron, like, I mean, Hermione didn't even finish the task. Granted, she got farther than everybody else did, but some of them, I mean, like, Ron's potion made him, like, almost vomit. We know Ron wasn't paying attention. I know he's a bad example of that. But there's, like, other kids, too. He just kind of, like, looked in and was like, ooh, and, like, quickly backed away. If the entire class is not understanding things, even if they all did tune out, the fact that they tuned out was because you didn't put it in a way for them to understand. So if you want them to pay attention, and you can recognize as a teacher when kids are not paying attention, or it's just like going over their heads, but they're nodding and being like, yeah, I get it, because everyone else clearly gets it, right? Like, no one wants to be embarrassed as the one person who doesn't know how to do it. Like, he as a teacher should have recognized, they're not getting this. I need to back up, re-explain it, demonstrate it, and then everyone can be successful.
I think the students require a little bit more accountability on their part.
Yeah, but if they're not doing it because they don't get it, then you got to go back and teach it again.
We'll have to agree to disagree on this.
Well, Harry definitely
but we
doesn't
have a
know
poll.
how to do it.
Is it Slughorn's fault or is it Harry's fault for blanking out? We have a poll.
Students or teacher?
Oddly, the teacher is blaming the teacher.
I know! What is this? I'm
defending the teacher. How does this work?
Well, Harry has not learned how to create antidotes for his potions.
So he tries to go back to the prince's book. And again, the prince didn't provide any explanation on the law because the prince also understood the law, stunningly. But he flips a couple of pages over to antidotes, and what's written on top of the list of antidotes is just shove a bazaar down their throats.
I love that. I love just shove it down his throat.
And so,
not like just use one, just shove it down their throat.
Well, that's the proper technique. But anyway, so Harry goes to the cupboard with all the supplies and rifles through it and finds a bazaar. Which,
remember, is a stone from a goat's stomach.
Yes. Which he does... It does ring a bell in his mind, like, wait a second, I remember this. Where do I remember this from? Oh, yeah, the first potions lesson.
Snape, once upon a time, said something. Maybe he did teach you stuff.
Maybe he did.
Maybe.
So, as Slughorn goes around, obviously most of the kids are not presenting a passable antidote. But Harry presents the bazaar, which I like the description of Slughorn looked at the bazaar for a solid 10 seconds before bursting out in laughter. And then it goes on this little monologue laughter of, oh, you're just like your mother. Your mother had this.
You're so cheeky.
Yeah. So he ended up getting 10 points for just sheer cheek.
I can totally put myself into Slughorn's shoes and just being like, this. I was completely unprepared for this response. My mind just goes blank, and then just crack it up.
Okay, here's a couple of things with Slughorn that I really liked. One, he's given 20 points to Gryffindor, and 10 of those points were because a kid was cheeky with them.
You're sassy, and you get points for it.
He's a Slytherin. He was the head of Slytherin House.
Right.
Clearly, just a massive difference from Snape.
Oh, yeah.
So there's that, number one. And number two, I like his response here in that, fair enough, I can't fault you because you're technically correct. Right. That works for everything in this room.
Right.
However, you should really know how to do the antidote.
That is a very good response as a teacher. I will give him that.
Yeah. So I do kind of like that.
Hermione's not too pleased, though, because she's like, gosh darn it, I wanted him to fail, and here he got 10 points for us. Like,
she is livid.
She's not happy. Ron's also not happy, but Harry pointed out, like, what, were you also going to get the same thing? We can't both do it. That would be stupid.
Yeah. So Harry takes this just adoration from Slughorn as an invitation to take Ron's tactic of bluntly asking him after a potions class, So Harry offers, like I said, a very blunt attempt to ask Slughorn about Horcruxes, and it stunningly did not go well.
Yeah, like the whole room goes cold of like, ooh, mood shift.
Yeah, it
Very
was
dramatic
a
mood
very
shift.
tonal change. Slughorn calls him out, like, clearly Dumbledore put you up to this. And Harry tries, he realizes, like, ooh, okay, now's not a time to lie. Yes.
Yes. He did show
Yes,
me
he
your
did.
memory. And Harry was like, well, I thought that maybe there would be more to it. And Slughorn is basically like running out of the room. He's like, no, you saw it. That's what it is. I know nothing about Horcruxes. Goodbye. And just like,
Gone.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of fallout with this going forward. One, Harry notices Slughorn is not having his usual Slug Club meetings. He was waiting for an invitation. He was going to reschedule Quidditch practice around it so he can go. But he hadn't been invited. Ginny hadn't been invited. Hermione, and no one to his knowledge had actually been invited to one. So for all intents and purposes, Slughorn's kind of shut that down for the time being.
He's a smart man.
Yeah. And then also, to compound his problems, Hermione is whiffing on Horcruxes in the library. She said she's been through the restricted section, and she's found barely a hint of the word Horcrux. The only thing she's found is the line, "Of the Horcruxes, wickedest of magical inventions, we shall not speak nor give direction."
Which comes from the book Magic Most Evil.
Which gave a wail when she closed it.
Yeah. Which that quote in itself made me go down a really deep dive about the dark arts, which I'm going to save for spoilers.
Okay.
But it was fascinating.
All right. Well, that's something to look forward to. A little tease for the spoiler section.
There you go.
So we move on to apparition lessons. Apparition lessons take place. We get our first lesson, which is taught by Wilkie Twycross, who's an instructor from the Ministry of Magic. He's given the description of oddly colorless, transparent eyelashes, wispy hair, and just an insubstantial air about him.
I do wonder if this man is just albino or if, like, Harry thought that the amount of times he's apparated has kind of taken away his color, I guess,
Well, yeah, he has that debate of whether it's the amount of times he's apparated that's taken bits from him, or if that's just who he is and it leads to being a good...
Yeah, like it's easier for you to apparate
Right.
if you're void, I guess.
Well, that's what Ron had hinted to in a previous chapter with Charlie. Charlie's so muscular and stocky that he had a tough time figuring out how to apparate. And here you have essentially what's described as almost the exact opposite of Charlie.
Yeah, like a wisp of a man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, that might have something to do with it. But we find out that Albus has lifted the enchantment for apparition in the Great Hall for 1 hour.
Which, again, this is a lesson that's taught once a week for 12 weeks.
Correct.
For 1 hour.
Yep.
So you're only getting 12 hours worth of training on how to apparate. I still feel like that's not enough to do this properly.
I will give you that 1 hour a week seems a little light.
I mean, like, we're in the state of Illinois. I'm pretty sure that now to get your driver's license, you need at least 50 hours of practice, like, behind the wheel. And that's before you even take, like, the driving tests and stuff. So 12 hours is like, whew, that's not much.
Well, they purposely put it on a Saturday so it doesn't take away from your regular lesson schedule. So I feel like, why couldn't they do, like, a double lesson of, like, 2 hours or something
Yeah,
like
because
that?
I feel like, I mean, the first few attempts of this is, you're not going to get anywhere. This is a hard thing to do.
Right. So for the lessons, they obviously space out the students so that everybody gets a little space. They have a wooden hoop that appears in front of them that they're going to be apparating into, hopefully.
I 100% picture hula hoops from, like, your gym.
Sure.
Like that kind of thing. Like, which also then makes me think, does Hogwarts have PE where they have little hula hoops everywhere?
Highly doubtful. So, I don't know. Maybe Madame Hooch has, like, a storage closet somewhere. Dumbledore does not seem to be present, but along with Twycross is the 4 heads of house who try to wrangle their students into some orderly fashion. Harry ends up placing himself near Draco because he notices Draco arguing with Crabbe.
Yeah.
And he gets close enough to hear that Draco's just telling him to just do as they're told, and he's not sure how long it'll take.
And that they have to keep doing the lookout.
Which then Harry interrupts with like, I don't know, I would tell my friends if they were being my lookout. And I'm like, why are you even saying that?
I don't know.
If he's not aware of your presence,
Let him keep talking.
let him keep talking.
Yeah, no.
I don't understand
Harry
that.
can't help himself when he's around Malfoy. He just
guess.
wants
It
to continue acting
needs
him
to be
on.
sassy. Anyway, the lesson begins. And we get the 3 Ds. Dip, dived. Oh, no. Sorry. It's wrong Phantom. Wrong Phantom. Dodgeball reference for those.
Oh, there you go.
Dip, dive,
Dodge.
duck.
Dodge again.
Something like that. Anyway, the 3 Ds are actually destination, determination, deliberation. So you have to fix your mind firmly on the destination where you're trying to go. You have to focus your determination to occupy the visualized space in your head. And then you have to turn on the spot, feeling your way into nothingness, moving with deliberation.
So here's my question with this. Like, in theory, you could apparate anywhere as long as you can visualize the location, right?
Technically, that's how they present it.
But if you've never been to a place and you can't visualize it, would you still be able to apparate there? Or if you've been to a place, but then it's been like modified since the last time you were there and it doesn't look the same anymore, does that create complications or does it not? Because you can still like visualize the space. It's just the surrounding area is a little different.
You like think you're apparating into a park and now you're apparated into a wall because a building
Yeah, because like a building's there or something.
Yeah,
I don't know. Because I was thinking like it would be really, really cool to apparate to, I mean, like you just apparate across the Atlantic Ocean and now you're abroad. But if you can't visualize the actual space, then how are you able to do that?
I also don't know how distance affects it because you are transporting your
entire body.
being
Yeah.
through space and time.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming there must be some distance complication. Like I'm assuming you can't apparate across the world.
Because he doesn't say anything about time, though. It's just the destination. As long as you can picture it, then you can go there. But then that does beg the question of like what if, you know, my sister moved to a new place and I wanted to go visit her, but I've never been there before. Can I do that, or do I have to literally like travel to her first? Like the longer way, see the location, and then be like, okay, now I could apparate here.
But like, so if the Weasleys went to Egypt, do they all apparate there? Can they do side-along apparition there for the younger kids? Do they do flu powder? And do they just see whirling fireplaces for like 4 hours as they're like going, like, how does this work?
I would guess with magic it'd be more immediate. But I don't know, it would be like, could Bill like describe the location to them, and that description alone would be enough to help them apparate successfully?
I feel like that's such a cheat code that there has to be some distance limit on it.
I don't know. He didn't mention any.
He didn't mention any.
But I'm curious about it, so I don't know.
Well, Harry being Harry, he finds himself very hard to clear his mind.
What a concept.
He can't firmly focus on the destination, which is right in front of him, because he's too worried about the Draco news.
Yeah.
So he can't clear his mind, which Stunner, from all of Order of the Phoenix and him trying to do occlumency, he can't clear his mind ever. So naturally, he fails. He doesn't apparate into the hoop.
To be fair, nobody else does either.
No, it was a pretty overwhelming failure for the group, which no one seemed particularly surprised by. And I put in the note, like, the teachers must find this hilarious.
Oh my god, yes.
Like, turning around, tripping over yourself into a hula hoop.
Who was the one kid? Was that one Dean where he just like jumped into the other, or
No,
was that Ernie?
It was Ernie. Dean
Again.
laughed at him.
Yeah, he like literally just like leapt into the other hoop and was like, "Oh, I did it!" It was like, "No, you didn't, you fool."
Yeah. Ernie spun around, tripped, ended up hopping into the hoop, opened his eyes, like, "Oh, I did it."
I did it. No.
No, you did not.
But the real reason why the teachers are here, probably, other than just keeping the kids like focused, Susan Bones on the 4th attempt, she splinched herself and pretty badly, I would say.
She ended up wobbling in the hoop because her left leg was left behind.
Can you imagine that?
That would be traumatic.
Yeah.
For everyone. Not just
I
her.
mean, the house heads like rushed over. And I know like probably when I was younger reading this, I just pictured like a Halloween decoration, just a leg, you know? But this, like, you're going to have blood gushing out of you as this happens, right? Like,
you would assume
would, like, it would just be such a mess and just, you'd panic.
So the heads of house, like you said, rushed to rectify the situation. They had they surrounded her, and then there was a puff of purple smoke, and then she seemed to be put together again.
But also traumatized.
And then they get into an explanation of splinching. Splinching is the separation of random body parts when the mind is not sufficiently determined. So, I mean, I honestly forgot that definition of splinching was there, and the cause of it, which is kind of interesting.
I do wonder, like, to what degree can a person, like, splinch themselves? Like, is there a percentage of how focused you are or not that makes the body part left behind either bigger or smaller? You know?
I mean, it could be pretty bad, especially if you're apparating more than 2 feet away. Like, if you're apparating miles away or, like, to a different part of town, and you can't get back to your
and there's, like, nobody around to come help you.
You're in real trouble.
It makes you wonder how many, like, muggle crimes are out there of, like, we found this random ear. We don't know whose it is. There must be a body out there somewhere. And someone's like, I splinched myself. Like, whoops.
Maybe. The first round of apparition did not go particularly smoothly, but Harry is in a rush, naturally, to tell Ron and or Hermione about his Draco Malfoy news.
Got spill the tea.
But they run into Peeves. And I have to mention Peeves because you're on the
I
podcast.
love all Peeves moments.
They run into Peeves in the hallway who's jammed a door and won't let people pass until they set their own pants on fire. And
then Neville comes into the common room later looking for a new pair of pants.
Yeah. Harry and Ron just split off and go through a shortcut that they have. Neville apparently got caught up in Peeves' trickery.
Peeves must torture Neville, like, all the time.
You'd think Neville, especially after his DA training, would get a little bit more courageous with Peeves, but maybe not.
No. Oh, I love Peeves.
So Harry pulls out the Marauders map and hunts down Malfoy on the map with Ron right there. And this is the beginning of
your favorite part of this book.
Well, I mean, it's not the beginning. He's been doing this for a long time now. But he essentially says he's going to begin stalking Malfoy on this map.
Yeah. Which he said, like, I mean, there's times where he sees Crabbe and Goyle together without Malfoy, where they're, like, kind of standing stationary. Or there's times where he can't seem to find Malfoy on the map. But he just assumes,
this is over weeks, by the way.
Yeah, because
we've had a time
he
jump.
is creeping whenever he gets a chance. He said he was, like, going to the bathroom with his map, which reminds me of my students, like, going to the bathroom with their cell phones. Like, they're constantly distracted. But he just assumes, like, oh, you know, maybe this is similar to Ron and Hermione, where their friendship is also falling apart. That's unfortunate.
Crabbe and Goyle being split.
Yeah, from Malfoy.
Right.
Yeah.
Malfoy, like you said, was sometimes not with them, sometimes nowhere to be seen on the map at all. Mm-hmm. So there is that. What Harry does notice, though, is he's like, well, maybe I'm just missing Malfoy amongst the hundreds of tiny black dots.
I saw you wrote this comment on your notes.
Hundreds of tiny black dots.
I was like, once again, back to that conversation we had, like, back in book 1 of how many people are actually in this castle.
Quite a few, apparently.
Like, I mean, we've talked before about how one inaugural class seems to be, what was it, like 40, 50-ish, 60-ish? And it's like hundreds are here now. Yeah,
so what she is clearly doing is she is only showing us a very tiny percentage. And this Mandy Brocklehurst that we got that one time, there's hundreds of tiny black dots. Anyway, We also find out that the Hogsmeade trip coming up in March is canceled, and Katie Bell, still not back from St. Mungo's.
Yeah.
So that happened pre-Christmas, and
now
she's
it's
still
March.
not out of the hospital from it.
I mean, Ron's bummed because he's like, oh, it was going to be on my birthday. I thought it was going to be a really, really fun thing, but oh well.
We also get a little drop of knowledge that further disappearances have been reported in the Prophet, including family members of Hogwarts students, which they don't elaborate on. They just drop that little nugget like, hey, the war is still going.
Of the hundreds of students, some of them are losing their parents.
The war is still going.
Yeah.
Like, things are still happening.
Yeah.
It's not just stopped because we're following Harry Potter in this, like, couple of minutes. It's just a little note to be like, no, there's murders and stuff going on.
Yeah, they're safe in the castle, it seems, but not out in the real world.
We get the note that apparition's still not going well after 3 lessons worth, so 3 weeks have at least passed. And we finally approach Ron's birthday, March 1st.
Yeah.
March 1st.
Well, she got some good presents. Harry gave him some new keeper's gloves, which he seemed excited about. Arthur and Molly got him a brand new watch, which he made the comment like, oh, I should try to come of age every year. So, he's turned 17 because coming of age in the Wizarding World is 17 years old.
Yep. He's also housing, just absolutely demolishing these chocolate cauldrons. I mean,
3.
he is housing them.
Such a teenage boy. I'm just like, shove food in my mouth as quickly as possible.
Harry notes a sudden change in Ron's demeanor.
He gets very moody.
Well, he gets a particular mood. He says that he can't stop thinking about Romilda Vane.
Yeah.
And he's in love with Romilda.
Well, he was like, she doesn't even know I exist. And Harry's like, who the heck are you talking about? Because he thought he was talking about Lavender.
Harry's like, if he starts referring to her as Lav, I'm done. I'm just done.
Fair. Very fair.
But no, Harry eventually figures out that, this is different.
Yes.
Like, this was going down a path that Harry was like, this is getting weirder and weirder and weirder.
Well, because Harry was like, okay, you're joking. And then Ron punched him in the ear. He's like, you were insulting her. How dare you? And Harry had to do Levi Corpus. And then he was like, oh, wait a second. Those cauldron cakes were not your presents. They were in my trunk, which I flung half of my trunk out because he was looking for the Marauders map to stalk Malfoy again.
Right. I do like this moment where Harry's thinking of revenge because Ron just punched him in the head.
Yeah.
And he's like, I should let Ron follow this path and just wreak chaos on everything.
To be fair, it'd be very entertaining.
It would be. But he makes the right call of like, no, he's not in his right mind. He wasn't in his right mind when he hit me. Mm-hmm. There's obviously something malicious at play. Mm-hmm. And what kind of friend would I be if I let him follow this path? Which is true. What kind of friend would you be?
Yeah. But the fact that he's eaten 3 of these things, and I mean, they've been in his trunk since, like you said, before Christmas.
Well before Christmas.
I don't understand why Harry didn't just like toss these the minute he got up to his room. He knew, like, when Romilda tried to give him the gilly water, which he said, again, I don't like that. Like, he knew that that was tainted, so he should have... I mean, he knows that these were tainted. He said that they had love potion in it. So why he just didn't throw them away, I don't know.
So he ends up bringing Ron to Slughorn, which is a wise move. Mm-hmm. And Slughorn, questions, like, Harry, you're so good at potions. Why didn't you whip up a quick antidote for this? And Harry's like, this is maybe a little bit above my pay grade. I'm not really sure about this.
Can I add in one other thing that happens before he gets to Slughorn? They passed by Lavender because she was trying to, like, bring the birthday present, and Ron's like, get out of the way, Harry's gonna go introduce me to Romilda Vane. And Lavender has this look on her face like, what the heck just happened? And Harry, like, he did the wrong thing. He didn't actually give a verbal acknowledgement of, like, oh, he had love potion or anything. He just kind of gave this, like, this grip, like, I don't know, some kind of face that just made Lavender even more upset. He
tried to make a, like, understanding, like, I am so sorry about this face.
But it was more like, this is hilarious.
It came off as bemused.
Yeah. So she's not happy.
No. But when they get to Slughorn, Slughorn makes a very astute observation. He's like, okay, if he had this love potion, has the love potion expired? Because if the love potion expired...
Or that it strengthens
it
as it
exponentially
ages.
strengthens what the potion... So he ends up throwing together a remedy fairly quickly.
Well,
Slughorn...
only after Harry had to be like, hey, it's Ron's birthday. Like, could you please...
It's a Saturday morning.
do
Slughorn just,
this?
like, woke up. He slept in.
It's like, come on, sir. Just do it. You don't need convincing. Just do it.
And he says, we wanted to take him here because, Madame Pomfrey might be asking some questions and blah, 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 blah. But no, Slughorn whips up a remedy for this.
Really quickly.
Really quickly.
Yeah. And Ron looks horrified when he finally takes it. Like, what was I just doing? Oh my God.
Yeah, he looks, I think they give him like a very melancholy look or something like that. And Harry's like, oh, so you're back to normal now.
I'd be so mortified, honestly. Like, I mean, this goes back to our conversation about love potions in general, but like, to realize that you almost completely ruined your life by going after Romilda. Imagine if he had seen her. That'd be awful.
Well, that's, again, goes back to our conversations on love potions. I don't think anybody here on the podcast is pro-love potion.
I mean, if he had seen Romilda and tried to kiss her, she could have been like, unwanted attention, you're like, harassing me, and that could be like,
Well, she would have just ended up jinxing him or cursing him. Or
something like that. Like, oh, it's just horrible.
But anyway, Slughorn decides that Ron needs a little pick-me-up. So he's choosing between butterbeer, wine, and he settles on this oak-matured mead that he had intended to give Albus as a gift during Christmas. Mm-hmm. So, first of all, he calls Ron Ralph, which is just classic. It's classic.
March. You need to know your students' names by March.
He does not register Ron as an individual because Ron has done nothing to put himself on Slughorn's radar. Like, not a thing.
And again, I don't care how, like, nothingness of a student you have. By March, you need to know their names.
Well, Ron reacts quite terribly to this mead.
Well, he gulps it down, like, as fast as possible.
Yeah.
Understandably.
And he starts convulsing, he starts twitching, his eyes start bulging, he starts turning blue. Mm-hmm. And Slughorn is paralyzed by shock as Ron is in, like, real danger. And honestly, I don't even, like, blame Slughorn for this reaction because it's your mead.
Yeah, you're not expecting it.
You are, like, this comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And you're probably like, well, what's even going on?
Yeah.
And as dumb as Harry was earlier by not being able to just think out an essential word problem in potions class, here is where Harry, I think, excels the most.
There's danger, he reacts to it.
You know what? You don't think.
Yeah.
Don't even think.
Yeah.
Just do.
Yeah.
And do the first thing that just comes to you. And he goes into Slughorn's stock and finds the bezoar that he had showed him earlier in the day, or earlier in that class that we were talking about, and shoves it down Ron's throat. Mm-hmm. And it ends up stabilizing Ron into this stillness.
And that's the end of the chapter. Talk about, like, a cliffhanger.
It is. Ron was in very clear, very real danger.
It was quite the birthday surprise.
And Harry did really well.
Yeah.
There to save his best friend. So, yeah. And I think they both did. Because, I mean, look, Ron ate 3 of these things. If they were an expired love potion, he, like, ate half the box.
Yeah.
Like, that could act as its own poison at that point.
Yeah.
I would assume, But Slughorn did well. Harry did better, and that's how the chapter ends.
Poor Ron.
Yeah, Ron, this is a struggle bus for Ron. This is a birthday that Harry will remind him of. Hey, remember
that time you almost, like, fawned and like, fell in love with...
If there's ever a Hogwarts reunion, do you think they'd go back?
Hey, Ron. Hey, Romilda Vane's over
there. Yeah.
Wanna go say hi?
Exactly. Do I have to restrain you from Romilda Vane again? Anyway.
Not funny in the moment, but funny in retrospect.
only because everything worked out.
Yes. Still alive.
Yeah, Ron is stabilized. So that's the good thing. That wraps up the non-spoiler section. So we will be back right after the break. And then Elizabeth will go into her dark magic deep dive.
Dun, dun, dun.
Before we get to our break sound, I'd like to acknowledge our friend Andy, who helps us produce our intros and our break sounds. If you want to hear more of Andy's work and like Formula One racing, check out the Outlap F1 podcast. It's your one-stop shop for Formula One news, insights, race previews, and reviews. You can find them wherever you listen to podcasts, and they even have a YouTube page. So check out Andy, Cody, John, James, and Deanna, and join them on the Outlap.
Where is he? Where's my 1-1?
All right, so we're back with the spoiler section of Chapter 18, Birthday Surprises. Elizabeth, you had some thoughts?
Harry's an idiot. Mostly this time because as he's looking at the Marauders map, he sees Crabbe and Goyle standing stationary. And it's like, Harry, that's them being lookouts. How do you not realize them not moving anywhere is them being lookouts for Malfoy?
Yeah, but he doesn't see Malfoy in that vicinity, so he doesn't
like,
put that together.
The fact that he doesn't put together that they're right by the room of requirement, which he spent all last year in.
To be fair to Harry here as well, and to be fair to Draco for a second, and we'll get to Draco the more this book goes on, but Draco, as a member of the Inquisitorial Squad last year with Umbridge, was part of the group that found
the room
of requirement.
Yeah.
And Draco took that idea and made it better. He improved upon what they were doing in the DA.
Oh, I think the fact that he goes to the room is super cool. Like, I feel like the fact that Harry never returns back to the room to do any other things with it, like, that's such a magic that could be explored in so many ways.
That's what Draco's doing.
Yeah.
Is he's taking the idea of what the room of requirement is.
Yeah.
And he's utilizing it to a more productive level.
Yeah.
And he's more fully just utilizing the room. So, I think Draco could be using it as what we find out later in Deathly Hallows is like...
It's a place to hide something.
You could hide something. You could hide yourself.
Yeah.
And it's not just necessarily one entrance and one exit. You can use it to be like, give me an exit, and it will find...
Well, that's what Neville discovers later on.
I think Draco's also...
Draco realizes, because he has the vanishing cabinet hidden in the room, that he can use that as a doorway to Bergen and Boar.
What I'm saying is, like, Harry uses it for one very specific purpose.
Yeah.
Draco then takes that and builds upon it.
Well, Harry has always, like... I mean, think about, like, the Shrieking Shack or the Chamber of Secrets. Like, he always seems to discover a location that's super cool, go back and visit. You can do things there. And I'm just like, I don't need it anymore.
No, but, I mean... Just use the... I'm not blaming Harry, don't get me wrong. The DA stuff was great, and he utilized that to its potential, what it was at that moment. What I'm saying is that Draco then takes that idea, and he's like, oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Here's how I can make that better.
Yeah.
And then Neville and Ginny and Luna and all of them later...
Yeah, in Book 7.
...take both of those and make it even better. Like... You're taking the room of requirement and you're realizing that it's...
You can do anything with it.
You could just,
Yeah.
Whatever your
Basically
imagination
anything.
is, you can make it go there.
No, the fact that he never goes back to it until Book 7 is like, oh, Harry.
I do agree with you he should realize, I can't find Draco on the map. Why?
Yeah.
And that should make him think of the room of requirement.
Yeah.
But
even just like the fact that Crabbe and Goyle are literally just standing there, not moving for hours.
But
there's a reason.
As we see later, and we'll get into it because it does come up in the next couple of chapters, he figures out it's the room of requirement and he still can't get in there.
Yeah.
Because again, Draco has thought of that. He's thought of solutions to things.
Well, Harry always asks, like, show me the place that Malfoy wants you to turn into. And for Malfoy, it's just like, give me the room where I can hide stuff. And I'm hiding my vanishing cabinet. Yeah. As I love it when the room turns into that location because I just think it'd be so cool to go through all the rows and rows and rows of stuff and just see what people have hidden.
It's something that Dumbledore's always alluded to, that and Dumbledore will admit this fully, I don't pretend to know everything that Hogwarts has to offer.
Yeah.
And it's foolish of Tom Riddle to think that he ever discovered the full potential, or the Marauders, or Fred and George, or whoever else. It's foolish to think you've found everything. But that means there's always something else to learn or something else to discover. And this is just an example of Draco taking something that he's like, oh, that's cool. What else can I do with that?
No, it shows a lot of thought on his part, which is...
It's a credit to Draco, I think.
Credit, yeah. I just think Harry's an idiot for not realizing the Crabbe and Goyle are being stationary lookouts, because that's what lookouts do. The other thing I am intrigued by, we know obviously Malfoy was the one who had Rosmerta give the mead to Slughorn in the attempt to then give it to Dumbledore. I'm very curious how many other loose-ended like murder attempts were out there that Malfoy attempted as like plan B, plan C, plan D, like that just never came to fruition.
Yeah, just throwing a dart at a dartboard and seeing if it stuck.
Yeah. So I'd be very curious to know what else he attempted that we just didn't see. But
there might be others. There might be others out there.
Yeah. But so in any case, as I said in the spoiler part, the quote that Hermione had about Horcruxes made me go on this whole deep dive on the wizarding world. First I started with Horcruxes, but then that led to the dark arts. So I kind of was all over the place. Starting with the dark arts, though. So Dumbledore suggested that if you use any form of dark arts, like the killing curse, it corrupts your soul, which is why he wanted to protect Malfoy from using it to kill him. That's why, Snape is the one responsible for doing it. It said that curses can be passed down through generations and remain in their genes, which I thought was interesting because I guess we've seen that with like Trelawney, that like the curse on Cassandra not being believed has kind of passed down, if you want to follow that lore. What I thought was really interesting, it was talking about wands, and it said that the core of a wand can change how successful you are with the dark magic. So, for example, if you have unicorn hair as your core, you're not really going to be able to produce dark magic very well. But if you have dragon heartstring, a phoenix feather, or a Rougarou hair, which I had to look up, it's a dangerous dog-headed monster that inhabited the swampy regions of Louisiana in the United States. I did not know about that. But if you have those cores, you're way more successful. And they also said if you have Yew-wood, you tend to be the most successful with dark magic. And that is exactly what Voldemort has as his wand. That Yew-wood. Dumbledore thinks the only power strong enough to resist dark magic is love, as he has always said, and you scoff at. Other than the unforgivable curses, though, they said that dark arts technically are not illegal. They're just frowned upon. So it was saying, like, in the First Wizarding War, how Aurors were encouraged to use those unforgivable curses to track down Death Eaters. Like, obviously, they were not arrested for using it. It was used as a tactic to get it. And then, like, the fact that Bergen and Burks is, like, exists to sell dark objects. They're also like, they're not getting shut down and raided every week, but it does make the ministry like have an easier time of tracking the dark arts that they do sell.
I still think you should at least have an Auror like stationed outside.
Like, who's buying what and
you should
why?
track everything that comes in and out of Borgin and Burkes during this particular time.
Especially this time. I was also talking about the different types of dark things, because there's obviously like the dark curses, there's dark creatures, there's dark potions. They said dark charms fall into 3 categories, which I've never actually thought about before. We have the lowest level being jinxes, higher than that are hexes, and then curses are the worst. And they said curses are the worst because that means they are the longest lasting, they're the stronger like effect, they're the most wicked, and they're less easily reversed. So if you have a jinx on somebody, like, yeah, you can reverse it. It doesn't last you very long, like the slug vomiting jinx that Ron put upon himself. But like the killing curse, there's no return unless you're Harry Potter. They had a list on the Wizarding World of all these known wizards and witches who are users of the dark magic. Umbridge is on that list, and she is credited as being the inventor of the black quill, which I didn't realize that she was the one who invented it. It's the one that draws blood from, whenever you write with it. And then in terms of Horcruxes, with it being seen as the worst dark magic, they said the reason being is because it is killing for a purely selfish reason, like your own immortality. It said the first known one ever created was by Herpo the Foul in ancient Greece, but Voldemort is the only one known to attempt more than one Horcrux. It said, in order to create a Horcrux, and this is a quote, only a true, deliberate, and conscious act of murder against another person without any regret or remorse would suffice to rend the soul. Killing out of self-defense or to protect another would not work, and neither would a mercy kill. So if you were trying to protect someone and you accidentally kill them, no, you can't make a Horcrux. Sorry. Not that I would guess you would want to. And then you use a spell, not a potion, not a charm. You use some spell in order to attach your fragment of your soul to an object. We know, because Dumbledore says later in Book 7 that the only way to reunite the pieces is to have deep remorse, but they said it can be very painful, if not fatal. The word Horcrux itself comes from Old English, which basically breaks down to Hor, meaning dirt, evil, or impurity, and crux, meaning container or pitcher. So basically, it's like a container of evil, which makes sense. J.K. Rowling had a quote where she compared the creation of a Horcrux to the splitting of an atom, where people wondering, can we do it, can we do it, can we do it, and then discovering the consequences are quite destructive. Should not do that. And it's unknown whether a dark wizard protected by a Horcrux would be killed if thrown through the veil in the Ministry or Department of Mysteries. And it's also unknown whether a Dementor, if they kissed a person with a Horcrux, would that destroy them, or would that part of their soul still exist elsewhere? Which again sounds like things that the Department of Mysteries would study. And then it's also interesting to note that all of Voldemort's Horcruxes were destroyed in the same order they were created. So quite a bit of information on the Wizarding World.
Yeah, say that again. It was all on the Wizarding World.
Wizarding World, yep. That website. So I thought it was fascinating. It took me out of the chapter for a good half hour of just reading all this stuff and be like, that's so cool.
I feel like that's type of magic that we're all, if we're really honest with ourselves,
we're curious about
and
that's
interested.
That's what Quirrell had. He was curious about it. He wanted to go study it further, and then he just happened to meet Voldemort and got sucked to the dark side of the Force. So but it is really interesting to see that it's both. It's not illegal, but it's frowned upon. But in some cases, it has uses, and it's just all how creative you want to be with it, I guess. It's cool.
Yeah, and it also comes down to because you could ask the question, well, if you have a certain wand core or you have a certain wand wood, like you were illustrating, wouldn't you be more suspicious, or wouldn't you watch those witches or wizards more carefully? But then you get down to, well, you can't punish someone for a crime that they haven't committed. Right. So
it's but they're prone to this?
Is that what that
mean? Or does it just mean they're more
It's
successful?
a Slytherin versus a Hufflepuff. You can't punish a Slytherin for being a Slytherin.
Right.
So you have to wait for the crime to occur before you can actually punish them.
But I also think it's interesting with the dark charms. We've seen all the kids use jinxes on them all the time. And it's technically that's dark that you're doing these spells on each other.
You're attacking
somebody, yeah.
You're attacking someone with a negative effect on that human being. Mm-hmm. So, that tracks.
Yeah, it has a certain darkness to want to do that to somebody.
And if we're remembering correctly, what got Slughorn's attention with Ginny, it wasn't a jinx, it was a hex.
Yeah, so that's the second level.
That's a step up.
Yeah.
The Bat Bogey Hex.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I just never thought about the classification of like jinxes to hexes to curses. It's always just been like, oh, that's the word she's using.
But even
no,
our
it makes
heroes
sense.
use jinxes and hexes.
I mean,
frequently.
Harry used an unforgivable curse, you know? So,
Multiple times. He's used an unforgivable curse more than once.
yeah. So, I don't know. It was really fascinating, and I had never gone down that path before, so I was lured by the darkness. Which you would think that me being me, that I would have read this stuff before, but I had not, so.
Well, that's part of this podcast that's interesting is, if you followed us from the beginning all the way back in book 1, chapter 1, we have gone down these deep dives of like, hey, this is kind of interesting. Let's dive into it more. And thankfully, places like the Wizarding World have
There's so much.
have done a lot of behind the scenes or extrapolation of information. And a lot of that's JK writing side stuff. 'Cause
It did say that she knew, like in her brain, she has all laid out what the spell process is for creating Horcrux, but she does not want to reveal that because she said there's some things the world does not need to know.
when she was writing these books, it's pretty well known that she had notes upon notes upon notes upon notes. And a lot of it is obviously just side information that doesn't ever get put into the books. Like she has a list of characters that never get mentioned. She has spells. She has settings, places that are, in her head and on like napkins because she used to write like at a restaurant.
Right.
So a lot of napkins, a lot of notebook pages that are just full with information. And she has published some through the Wizarding World. I don't know that she's published anything relatively recently. So if you're curious on a lot of that side, extra information, we try to mention as much of it on here as we can when that topic kind of pops up. But go check out the Wizarding World. It's a wealth of information if you want to kind of deep dive on all that stuff. So, yeah. Do you have anything else?
No.
Cool. We will wrap it up here. And thank you guys for listening. Thank you to our listeners in Belgium, like I mentioned earlier. We really appreciate all of that. I think we were heard in a couple of new countries too recently. Cambodia was one of them. Lithuania was another one. So
Very cool.
Thank you to those people in those countries. We really appreciate it. And we're kind of, amazed that so many people around the world have tuned into our little podcast here.
I mean, we've been doing this for 2 years now, and it still fascinates me.
Yeah, it's been crazy. So thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for participating in those polls. We have a poll listed on each episode that we put out on Spotify. It's really interesting to see those results. And if you have comments, leave them on the episode either on Spotify. You could shoot us a message on Instagram. You could shoot us a message on Twitter. We try to engage with you guys as much as possible on that. And whenever we do a live stream like Elizabeth and Jen did on Instagram, check it out. It's always fun to engage with you guys in real time as we're experiencing something Harry Potter related. So there's always that too. So check out our Instagram, check out our Twitter. It's at HogwartsAPod. And with that, we will wrap it up today. Give us a 5-star review on Spotify. That helps to share the podcast wherever you can and support the podcast. You can do so financially by clicking the support the podcast link. And we put in a lot of time and effort into this, so that helps too. But we will see you guys back next week for Chapter 19. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you for listening to Hogwarts, a podcast. If you like what you've heard, please click the subscribe button on your preferred podcasting app and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at HogwartsAPod.